We're going to do today is I'll spend some time just talking a bit about what the class is about and how we think of it, and then Paul Paul will go over the course structure, the requirements, exams, and so on and so forth at the end. What I want to do is give a sense of why we're doing a history of information class, what makes this the information age, why is that focus so important. When we talk about the information age, the phrase trails behind it a certain set of assumptions, most of which I would imagine you share. So I want to bring those up because they're things we'll be looking at over the course of the semester. Then I just want to say a brief word about why history matters, even if you're just interested in the future, why it's important to know the past. And then, as I say, Paul will say something about the structure of the class. Why history of information now? It's a course title that you can't imagine having been offered in the 1950s, much less a century ago, because every age sees the past through the lens of its own preoccupations. I want to start just by giving, how many people know the Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, the novel by Mark Twain? Not that many. It's not. It's most better known, best known. It's an interesting novel about a young man. Connecticut was at that time the Silicon Valley of the United States, where all the high-tech industrial work was going on. And he, through just hitting his head or something, finds himself back in the realm of King Arthur, and has a high time introducing to the court of King Arthur all of the modern improvements and marvels, to the point where at the end they have a big war, and all of these knights are slaughtered by machine guns, which is one of the things he introduces. But there's a moment in the book where he introduces printing, and he prints it. He's like, we need a newspaper here in Camelot, so we'll make this newspaper. He produces it, and he shows it to all these monks. Twain says, the monks around me besieged me with so many besieged me so with eager questions. What is this curious thing? What is it for? He's called Sir Boss. Sir Boss says, it is a public journal. I will explain what that is another time. It is not cloth. It is made of paper. Sometime I will explain what paper is. The lines on it are reading matter, and not written by hand, but printed. By and by, I will explain what printing is. 1,000 of these sheets have been made, all exactly alike in every minute detail. They can't be told apart. Then they all broke out with exclamations of surprise and admiration. 1,000, verily a mighty work, a year's work for many men. No, Sir Boss says, merely a day's work for a man and a boy. They cross themselves. Now, what's interesting about that is that for Twain, for somebody in the 19th century, in the midst of the Second Industrial Revolution, the most important thing about Gutenberg and print was that it presaged the world of mass production. The book is really the first mass-produced international commodity. And the idea of being able to produce 1,000 of the same thing, all alike, that was what was extraordinary. And in fact, when you look at encyclopedias of earlier times, this is a page from the entry on printing in the 11th Britannica, still for some people the classic, the only Britannica they want. You look up printing, there's an article on print. There is an article on printing, and it's a history of printing presses with all these terrific engravings of printing presses of the past. But the printing press and printing is important because it introduces the machine age, the age of mass production. Now for us, Gutenberg is still important, but people think of him in a very different way. One of the most important books, at least to establish a modern rhetoric of communication and information, is Marshall McLuhan, in particular the Gutenberg Galaxy, in which he sets up an opposition of 4 historical periods that people still pretty much believe in. You've got your oral culture, then you've got your manuscript culture once you get writing, then you get print culture, and then you get the electronic age. So print culture is this important moment of transition to a new age, not because it's mass production, but because it makes possible mass communication. It's a very different idea of what the significance of that was. And it's an example of how our conception of the past is shaped by our own preoccupations. As is true, we have I thought it's about a dozen hands from history. The course offerings in history cover a lot of material that nobody would have covered when I was an undergraduate. We have different interests, and we read the past differently. So we think of ourselves as living in the information age. This is a graph from the Google Ngram utility. It's not great, but it gives you the frequencies of various phrases over time in the Google Books collection. So if you look at this yellow curve here, that's the curve peaking about 1920, I think, or 1930, of the phrase the machine age. And then in red, I don't remember what that is, the atomic age. The little green one is the space age. That's what when I was a young man, I was in the midst of the space age. And then the information age, which is a phrase that really takes off in the 1970s, 80s, and now is the way everybody thinks of this period. So living as we do in the midst of an era that people think of as the information age, and we'll talk about what that means and whether it really makes sense at all, we look back and we say, well, how did we get here? And we read the past as a journey to where we are and see it in terms of this notion of information. So people just talk freely of the information age. You, the American people, have made our passage into the global information age, an era of great American renewal, and so on. So you can pull these off the system, do a search on information age, and your browser will crash. There's a lot of it out there. And people define it in different ways. If you go to the American Heritage, it's defined as having begun around 1970 with the introduction of heavy-duty computation. Wikipedia, which is an infallible source of received wisdom, if not always the truth, it says it began around 1990. People can begin it wherever they like. In fact, if you look and you say, well, who's the first information age president? Well, nobody picks George Reagan, and nobody picks George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush famously went into a supermarket and was marveling at the barcode scanners. What is this marvelous thing? So everybody in America knew what these things were. It was an indication of how out of touch he was. But Clinton was identified by many as the first information age president. And then W came in, and he was described as the first information president in 1906. And then Obama in 2009 is described as the first information age president. And whichever of you ascends to that post in the future, I'm sure one of you will surely be described as the first president of the information age. It's a moving target. But when we talk about the information age, there are certain assumptions, as I say, that brings with it. The second, you use the phrase. The first is the idea that the present is unprecedented. Nothing like this has ever happened before. And the second is the idea that what makes this the information age is the role of technology. So let me take those each in turn. The shock of the new, to take a phrase some people have used. Never before. Paul will be talking about this at some length next time, so I'm just going to mention it. The advent of the information age, what does it mean? It's fundamental changes in the nature of commerce, organizational structure, education, politics, public discourse, news and entertainment, gossip, community relations, for everything's different. Nothing is the same as it was. So why would we be interested in history then if everything's different? Well, it turns out, in fact, that when you start looking at the things that people are preoccupied with now in connection with information technologies, most of them have some kind of antecedent. Not necessarily the same problem, but a problem very like it. And often the very same problem. The generation gap that everybody speaks of. We've been there and done that. The death of distance, the annihilation of space and time. Paul will take it back in his lecture on pointing back to the late 18th century. People are talking about that, if not sooner. The end of the book, the death of the newspaper. The end of the book, people were proclaiming about 6 weeks after Gutenberg produced the first printing press. How do we organize and make accessible and unprecedented massive information? That was a problem that drove people crazy in the 17th century. And all kinds of devices, some mechanical, some new forms of books and organization, were devised to deal with a sea of information. They didn't call it information at the time, with which they had to deal. Piracy and IP, these questions of information, intellectual property, they go back also to the 18th century. Most of the ideas that we bring to it, like copyright and so on and so forth, are shaped in that period. And we still carry a lot of the ideas that were shaped then. Reliability, who can you trust online? All the way back to the 17th, 18th century. Privacy, the role of government, and so on. All of these issues and others we'll try to show have historical antecedents. They're not just interesting, but they've either shaped the way we still think about it, or give us an indication of just how contingent, how fragile our own conceptions are, and how easily they can change in the future. That doesn't mean there's nothing new under the sun. On the contrary, this is a moment of enormous change, and some of these things aren't precedented. But most of them have historical precedents. The second assumption is the historical role of technology. Whatever the information age is, it has to do with computers. It has to do with certain technologies. If we're going to date it, when people date the beginning of the information age, it's the date of the PC, it's the date of the web, it's or you can take it back to Jacquard's loom in the 19th century, or Babbage's difference engine, some people would say the first mechanical computer, whatever. Punch cards, ENIAC, the first general-purpose programmable computer from the late 1940s. Wherever you locate the beginning of it, you're going to identify it in terms of information technology. To the point where I assume most of you having registered for this class, assumed it was going to be a class in the history of information technology, more or less. It will and won't be. In fact, this is I looked around for another class in any university in America that was like this one. It was history of information and non-information technology. There's one at Oklahoma U, which I can't figure out if it is or is not the same. Otherwise, I haven't been able to find it. For most people, the history of information is the history of information technology. Why isn't this class then that? Why are we doing it differently? Well, I think because it's Berkeley. Like, what you want to do? What everybody else does, go across the bay. Oh, well, they do it there. But one problem is in tracing this notion of technological antecedents. Okay, let's say we say, okay, it's the moment of the personal computer, and we want to go. And we can look back and find a line of antecedents for this technology. There's a computer museum over. Was it in Sunny? No, it's in Mountain View. How many people have been there? Oh, well, you should have a field trip there. So, they have some of this stuff, and you can see how a lot of the things that we now, you can see antecedents for a lot of the things that we now associate with computation. And you can start with the Apple II and go back to the DEC PDP-11, which was the first portable computer. ENIAC, as I think I mentioned, the first programmable multi-general purpose computer. The Hollerith tabulating machine in 1890. Herman Hollerith developed it. It's the first punch card computing system used in the census. From then on, Hollerith starts a company that becomes IBM, and so on and so forth, going back into the 18th and even 17th century. And if you like, you can take it back farther than that. You can go to Napier's Bones in 17. John Napier, any of that name ring a bell for anybody? He invented something very important that all of you had to learn at one point or another. Logarithms, big deal. These are a set of sticks that, in some sense, are the antecedents of the slide rule that enable you to make logarithmic comparisons and to effectively do multiplication and division as addition and subtraction. The abacus, you can take it back further than that. Stonehenge. Nobody's sure what it is. It's a henge, we know that. But we had a wood one burned down, and we had a stone one. But people think it was a kind of clock system for determining the weather, seasons, or something like that. Well, that's a computing device in a way. The Antikythera mechanism, nobody knows what this is. A strange thing with some gears from the Hellenic period. Turned up off Italy in a shipwreck. Nobody knows what it was, but maybe it was a time calculator or something. But it has the feel of it. Or go back to these notched bones from 20,000 BC that were probably used to just keep track of dates. You can do all of that. But what do these things have in common? Well, what makes these things all the same? Well, they're all the same because we have computers now, and we look back and see them as antecedents of the computer. In fact, every technology creates its own antecedents, you could say. In the same way that mass production, the technology of mass production, you look back and say, oh yeah, Gutenberg is the antecedent of that. But to talk about a history of technology then, or just information technology, is often to lump together a set of things that are interesting only because they seem to lead up to us. We make ourselves the focus of interest. There's a notion of the Whig historians of the 19th century, they were called Whiggish history, is the idea that basically all of history is a triumphant progression to us. It's a very popular idea. You see these pictures, human evolution, we stand upright, we lose our hair, we get blonder. That happens over the course of millennia. And people tend to think of technology that way, in that same way. From those notched bones to the iPhone, it's just a steady progression, a steady progress. We want to be careful about thinking that way because these things have meaning and use within the context, within their own historical moment. And to see them all through the lens of modern preoccupations is in a certain sense distorted. Also, in any event, what is information technology? We talk about IT, we have an idea what it is. Laptops, servers, printers, iPhone, so on and so forth, routers. And maybe a few other things. Peripheral information technology. Bookcase, is that information technology? Yeah, see what that would be. An extension cord for sure. Paper, carbon paper files, staplers. Well, that's information technology. I guess you could extend it further and say, well, how about a megaphone? Yeah, that's information technology in the sense that it enables broadcasting of voice over distance. A compass, for sure. Telescope, yes. Is there anything that isn't information technology? A hammer and nails, an iron, can that be information technology? A T-shirt, a rowboat, a lantern, whatever. What can be information technology? You say, well, that's kind of a stretch. But look, you could take an iron and a T-shirt, a computer and a printer, and produce a Cal T-shirt. It carries information on all of you. I'm sure we're up late last night ironing the transfers on your T-shirts. Or take a lantern and a rowboat and a few other things. The Old North Church, and you've got Paul Revere's Ride. One if I land, and two if I see, and I on the opposite shore shall be. Remember that? When I was a kid, you had to learn those things by heart. That's a different age. But again, in this case, the rowboat and the lantern and the horse and so on become ancillary information technology. So where do you draw the line? What is information technology in any of it? What is it that makes us think of these as technologies? Moreover, one has to realize that these technologies are all interconnected in very complicated ways. To talk about the printing press, for example, or the typewriter, one of those, as if it were an independent motor force, and to talk about its consequences is to ignore two things. First of all, the enormous number of technologies that surround it. In the 19th century, the mid-19th century, if you worked in an office, a mercantile office, for example, which is a kind of exchange or an insurance office or whatever, you had to deal with correspondence. Not on the level of a major insurance company today, but this was an issue. There were two problems. You wanted to keep copies of all your letters, the letters you sent out for obvious reasons. How do you do that? Well, you could have clerks. They sat at desks that looked rather like this one, with quill pens and then steel pens. Steel pens, Paul, 1840s, 1850s, would make copies of all the letters. Right? I copied all the letters in a hand so free that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy, HMS Pinafore. But there were other ways to do it. One was devised by this gentleman on the upper left, James Watt, who brought us another technology, the steam engine, of rather greater consequence, but this is an important technology. The copy, letterpress and letterpress book. And here's the idea. You wrote your letter in a certain ink, slow-drying ink, and then you took it and you put it in a book, the pages of which were very thin, a certain kind of thin paper. And you surrounded both of those with felt. And then you closed the book. And then the office boy turned this press to press down the book on the letter, so that the slow-drying ink made an impression on the page next to it. Now, of course, that impression was going to be a negative backwards, right? But if the paper was thin, you could then read the letter through the other side. And this was how copies were made of outgoing correspondence. Incoming correspondence, of course, you couldn't do anything with at that point. And you had to store it somehow. You might store it in a roll-top desk. And the reason for all those compartments in the roll-top desk is people would roll up this correspondence and stick it in there. Why couldn't they stick it in flat files? Paper was too thin. I mean, the vertical files, paper was too thin for that. So you had various systems of flat files for storing the paper. Now, this is a small thing in office technology, but you can see how it's all interconnected. You needed the letterpress book, the ink, the type of filing, the desks, and so on and so forth. In comes the typewriter. Now, with the typewriter, you can create a different kind of impression, particularly if you have carbon paper. Another device that well, it went back to the 18th century. The antecedents of it actually invented first to enable the blind to write in a complicated system. But it really comes into use in the second half of the 19th century, 1860, 1870. And with carbon paper, you can make several copies of every letter you produce just by, you don't have to do this whole press book thing and so on and so forth. Moreover, you can make it on stiffer paper than you needed for the press book and so on and so forth. So you can have vertical files. Vertical files are much more efficient for getting it large because you can leaf through them this way, getting large amounts of data, large amounts of correspondence. If you have a bigger company, you're a railroad or insurance company, this is a big step forward. So in every office, all of a sudden you have these people who know how to type, right? And for writing the letters, there's another technology. You think of it as a technology, shorthand. Now, shorthand's been around for a long time, but these sort of modern systems of shorthand, Gregg and Pitman, really were introduced to become popular in the middle of the 19th century. And so you have somebody giving dictation to a typist who will then take the dictation over in the shorthand and having written it down in shorthand and type it out in the form of a letter. There were even to help people learn shorthand. There were even people who made books like Alice in Wonderland. They made copies of that in shorthand that you could buy at the time. Now, there's one other change that's happened in here between this and this. What's that? What about those offices? The one in the lower right and this one. Who's doing the work? Secretaries who are women. By the end of the century, the office workforce, the mode of production of office documents and storage has changed. The tasks are specialized and de-skilled to a certain extent. And the office workforce, which was almost entirely male in the first half of the century, is by now dominantly a female workforce. And there arise business schools and all of the other apparatus that involves having this number of women all of a sudden entering the workforce. And they were usually young single women. When you got married, you had to leave the job. That was until the 1920s or so. Obviously was an important force of social change. And the availability of that workforce and the rise of literacy and so on also made the new office possible. So the other point here is it isn't simply a question of technologies interconnecting, but the connection between technologies and the social custard they're floating around in. That also makes a big difference. And we'll be talking throughout this course at great length about the social context of technology and communication. We will spend a lot of time talking about periods in which very little happened technologically, like the 17th century, 18th century, but in which the structure of the modern informational system arose between dictionaries and scientific societies and intellectual property and newspaper. All of that arises without a huge amount of driving technological change, but with enormous social change surrounding it. So why are we doing this? Most of you, I assume, how many people if you have engineering students here, people in technology? A fair number of you, and the rest of you all are planning. How many people are not? Hands of people who are not planning to do a startup in the next 5 years. Oh, there are a few, yeah. You have a great interest, just being who you are, being of the age you are, of the era you are, and probably personally what's going to happen, how do we figure out what's going to happen, how do we know that? Well, how does knowing the past help us to get the future right, or at least how does it enable us not to get the future wrong? I'm always fascinated by these representations of the future, which go back to the late 19th century, these utopian visions. This is a particularly famous one, the 1939 World's Fair in New York, and I have a picture of the Trilon and Perisphere, the kind of Eiffel Tower-shaped thing and the round ball next to it, so with the symbols of that fair. General Motors made a ride called the Futurama, which you sat here and you were taking around this little model of the future and you saw cars and cities and so all built around the automobile. I mean, it's General Motors, right, doing this. They reproduced this actually at the 1964-1965 World's Fair in New York. I was an undergraduate, giving my age away, for this, and actually I had a job in the summer working at the General Motors Futurama for cattle. The idea, you see this building here on the upper left, where that big tail fin was, if you really look at that car, was the entrance. You went through there, you went to the Futurama ride, you came out to that round part where there were all of the divisions of GM had show cars, special cars made for the show, and people in red blazers who talked to. I was working in the Cadillac division and talked about Cadillacs and so on and so forth. We had a lot of fun that summer. But there was another Futurama there, and it showed visions of the future that are very much, nothing so easy to date, no easier way to date an age than by looking at the way it portrays the future. So if you look at that, I think it's an undersea house there in the center, 1963, right? You can tell immediately. The car, I think that's on the moon or the desert house. There was a moon. I don't remember which of these is which. This may be the moon. But people were living on the moon. They were living under the water zone, and they were driving futuristic 1963 Chevrolets is what they were driving.